Are you an overworked employee or an entrepreneur trapped in your own business? Do you have an interest in working to live instead of living to work? We're often told that success is directly correlated with hard work and that we won't get anywhere if we don't put in long nights and endless hours. But what if I told you that that wasn't the case? In this first episode of Between the Covers, a new book series where I cover key insights from interesting books, we are discussing The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. If you managed to look past the clickbaity title and the arrogant tone throughout the book, I believe there are several valuable insights from this book that we as readers can use to transform the trajectory of both our working and personal lives. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Andrew and I'm a certified public accountant and former financial analyst. And on this channel, we explore data-driven strategies to help us achieve financial independence. To provide some context, the book starts off with this idea of deferrers versus the new rich. Tim Ferriss defines deferrers as those who save it all for the end, only to find that life has passed them by. The common example of this is the average person who works a normal 9-to-5 job for 40 years and then retires at the age of 65. The new rich are those who abandon the deferred life plan and create luxury lifestyles in the present using the currency of time and mobility. In today's terms, these are the digital nomads of the world, aka those who travel freely while working remotely using technology and the internet. Now, the book outlines a 4-step approach using the acronym DEAL or DEAL to reinvent yourself to become a member of the new rich. DEAL stands for definition, elimination, automation, and liberation. Definition introduces the rules and objectives of this new game and explains the overall lifestyle design recipe. Elimination kills the obsolete notion of time management and provides the first of the 3 luxury design ingredients: time. Automation discusses how to put cash flow on autopilot and provides the second ingredient of luxury lifestyle design: income. Finally, liberation includes the concept of mini retirements and delivers the third and final ingredient for luxury lifestyle design: mobility. Beginning in the definition step of the 4-part approach, Tim introduces the freedom multiplier, in which money is multiplied in practical value depending on the number of W's in your life: what you do, when you do it, where you do it, and with whom you do it. This brings us to our first key takeaway, which is understanding that there are 3 currencies to consider: money, time, and mobility. We are introduced with the idea that relative income is more important than absolute income as long as our relative income adds up to the minimum amount necessary to actualize our goals. See, absolute income considers only one variable, money, while relative income uses 2 variables, money and time. To visualize this concept, let's say Bob rakes in $200,000 a year, working 50 weeks a year, 80 hours a week. His hourly rate is thus $50 per hour. Now let's say our friend Bill makes $100,000 per year, $1,000 for each of 50 weeks per year, but works only 10 hours a week and thus makes $200 per hour. While Bob is 2 times richer in absolute income, if you consider the value of both time and money or relative income, Bill is actually richer than Bob. Now, to incorporate the third currency, mobility, we need to discuss the concept of geographic arbitrage. Geographic arbitrage is a strategy used to take advantage of differences in prices between various locations to get more for your dollar. For example, the median rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in Boston is around $2,500 a month. In Orlando, Florida, you could get a similar apartment for about $1,300. By having the freedom of mobility and moving from one city to another, you can cut your rent nearly in half. Now, Tim goes to extreme measures in his book, stating that fun things happen when you earn in dollars, live in pesos, and compensate in rupees. Moving on to elimination, this step of the 4-part approach highlights the difference between being effective and being efficient. Effectiveness is doing the right things, while efficiency is doing things, whether important or not, in the best way possible. The book mentions that being efficient without regard to effectiveness is the default mode for most people, but highlights 4 key principles to become more effective. The first comes from a man by the name of Vilfredo Pareto, who invented Pareto's Law, or the Pareto distribution. Today, we often refer to it as the 80-20 principle. This principle highlights that 80% of the outputs result from 20% of the inputs. Said another way, 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort and time. Therefore, focus on maximizing and improving the effectiveness of the 20% effort that produces the majority of the results, and look to eliminate or outsource the less effective and more time-consuming actions. For a product business, this could mean eliminating unpopular SKUs that result in little to no sales, and instead focusing on continually bettering the bread and butter product of the business. The second principle is understanding Parkinson's Law. This idea states that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So when working a normal 9-to-5 job, since we have 8 hours to fill, we fill those 8 hours. Tim argues that if we had 15, we would fill all 15, and if we only had 2, that we would fill 2 and most likely still complete the same number of tasks. This is because time constraints forces us as humans to have no choice but to focus solely on execution, while having extensive amounts of time allows us to use that time both ineffectively and inefficiently. Therefore, a good way to overcome Parkinson's Law is to schedule work tasks with very short and clear deadlines. The third principle the book highlights to become more effective is having a low information diet, or as Tim calls it, being selectively ignorant. It's important to ignore or redirect information that is irrelevant, unimportant, or unactionable. It's not enough to use information for something, it needs to be immediate and important. Information is useless if it is not applied to something important, or if you will forget it before you have a chance to apply it. Today, there are so many sources of interruptions and useless information, especially in the world of social media, and so we should all be selective with the type of information we consume. The fourth principle to become more effective is batching. Batching is a productivity strategy that involves grouping similar tasks together to complete in one time period. The purpose is to avoid context switching, which is essentially physically and mentally jumping back and forth between tasks. According to studies, there is a psychological switch of gears that can require up to 45 minutes to resume a major task that has been interrupted. More than a quarter, or 28% of each normal 9-to-5 work period, is consumed by such interruptions. An example of effective batching in the workplace can be checking emails only at a few dedicated time periods throughout the day so that you don't get distracted by every email. Another example can be making sure to have meetings one right after another, instead of having them spread out randomly throughout the day. Moving on to automation, this step of the 4-part approach focuses on outsourcing. While doing something yourself is always cheaper, it doesn't necessarily mean you should, especially if you don't want to or aren't good at the specific task. If you spend your time worth, let's say, $25 per hour doing something you hate, like shoveling snow, that someone else would do for $10 per hour, it's simply a poor use of resources. Even if the cost to outsource is more per hour than what you currently earn, it can still make sense to outsource in some instances. For example, let's say you have a YouTube channel and it takes you 2 full days to edit a YouTube video. Assuming your hourly rate is $10 per hour, the cost for you to edit the video would be $160. Now, if you pay a good editor $15 per hour who can edit the same video just as good, if not better, in one single day, it would now only cost you $120 or $40 less than the total amount it would cost you to edit yourself based on your hourly rate. When I worked as a consultant, the company I worked for had a whole offshore team located on the other side of the world. I would often outsource more time-consuming, mundane tasks, which allowed me and the rest of the onshore team to focus on higher level priorities. Nowadays, many companies leverage offshore resources for business purposes, so make sure to check if your company has offshore resources available as well. Now, the last step of the 4-part approach is liberation, or the freedom of location. As an employee, the opportunities to work remotely or at least a hybrid environment today has increased dramatically since the pandemic. Remote work spiked from 6% of full workdays in the US prior to the pandemic to more than 50% in the spring of 2020. Since then, it has steadily decreased back down to 28%, but that still means roughly 1 in every 4 jobs are remote. Ultimately, having unrestricted mobility, eliminating useless information and tasks, and automating processes provides you with the framework to liberate yourself from being an overworked employee or an entrepreneur trapped in your own business. If you're someone interested in utilizing specific strategies to become more effective, I definitely think you will find great value from this book. Now, there are several sections that are a bit outdated, which you can skip over. And like I mentioned at the start of this video, try to ignore the arrogant tone throughout the book and focus on the actual principles instead. Now, if you're interested in how I applied this book to my own life, make sure to check out this video where I discuss in detail why I decided to quit my 6-figure finance job. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, be sure to subscribe as I make content like this every week. As always, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.